Welcome to this episode of Mercy Can't Stop Her, the podcast where we share the stories of women's resilience through chaos, crisis, and the challenges of life. I am your host, Judith Kambia Obatusa, JKO. Just first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone that's listening to this podcast right now. I want to appreciate you because without you, there will be no Mercy Can't Stop Her. Thank you because Mercy couldn't stop you from listening. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to share a few things. So we're coming down to the end of season 2 of the podcast, and we're going into season 3. And transitioning into season 3, I'll be sharing some interviews I've had with some amazing women. And there are lots to learn. And I'm hoping to hear your feedback on the things you've learned. And starting with today's episode, we'll be sharing some truths for us women, especially if you're a woman who maybe you are a housewife, you are a homemaker, you're devoted to your family. This episode is one that you should listen to because you will see the transition and how our guest came into her own, even when she didn't even know what she wanted to do. So let's get into it. Mrs. Iyaiya Thomas Ofem is the creative director of 2401 Crafts. It's hands-on business where she makes headgears and different things that women use to beautify themselves. She is also the convener and the founder of the Evolve 360 Woman Initiative Nigeria. Evolve 360 Woman Initiative convenes yearly conferences where women are empowered with the stories of other women. They support women who are doing business, traders, people who do crafts. They help them with finances and also other hands-on support as the year goes on. So every year they have recipients of these funds. You'll hear more about this as the conversation goes on. Iya, thank you so much for honoring us with your presence today. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
In 2014, Iya published a novel called Iyaiya, the Nigerian housewife. It was a story about a woman who, in the course of her marriage, she discovered that she had to lean more on God than putting all her hope in her husband. This beautiful book can be found on Amazon. She has always been one who wanted to empower women. In fact, when she shared her personal vision statement with me, I'm going to read it to you so you can understand that this person is passionate about empowering women to be their very best self and to not just be themselves for themselves, but to also support one another. Many people tell us that women, we love to compete. But no, she's saying we have a unique form of sisterhood when we complement and when we support one another. So, Iya, these are really wonderful things that you do. And I'm going to ask you a few questions. But let me just read Iya's personal vision statement. I help women find the power within them to define themselves, collaborate instead of compete, thereby redefining sisterhood. So, Iya, I want us to go back to when we talk about Mercy Can't Stop Her. It means that there was a time in your life when things were not perfect, when it was as if it was a mess. And our messes are different. For different people, their messes are different. And inside that mess, you began to put together some things that helped you redefine who you were. Could you tell us a little about that mess?
Okay. As a young woman that just got married, and then I had to move to join my husband in his new location. It was difficult starting afresh. Where I was established already. That was where I finished my university. But then I got married and my husband was at Enugu. And then after the wedding and everything, celebrations, we had to relocate to Enugu. And then a few months later, he got a job in Lagos. I had to relocate back to my village because then my movements were tied to him. I was in the village for some few months and then I had to move again to Lagos. And then you see that those movements were always putting me in a tight spot where I can't even start anything because I don't know the next trip we are going to take or the next movement. And then when the kids came, all my attention was centered on them having a comfortable life. So I had to put my dreams aside. I had to put everything I had aside just to make sure that my family was in one piece. And then a few years later, I think a year or two after Lagos, we moved to Abuja. It was when we were in Abuja, we had a kind of stability because we spent about 4 years in Abuja. And then that was when I decided that I have to start learning whatever skills I can acquire because I don't know what tomorrow will look like. First, I started with the beats in Lagos. I went for a training at the University of Lagos consultancy section of one of those departments and learned how to make beads. That's necklaces. And then we moved to Abuja. Because of those movements, I got a job. But about 6 months, I resigned from the job because I could not balance the job with the family situation or balance it where I found myself. I have to be at the office by 8 a.m. And then I have to drop the children in school by 7 o'clock. And then be at the office by 8, come back to pick the children by 5. And I discovered the nature of my husband's job. He was always traveling. So if he travels and I have to be at the office that I close by 6 p.m., how do I pick my kids by 4 p.m.? So I had to make the decision to resign. So that was where everything came to, I don't know how to put it now, but that was when I knew that, okay, I can't do any other thing except this family. That's where my focus has to be. And then few years, I think 4 or 3 years in Abuja, he got a job in Malawi. We had to move again. So you see, throughout my first 15 years of marriage, we were moving from one location to the other. And because of that movement, I couldn't do anything concrete. I couldn't even plan anything for myself because my life was tied to my husband's career. But then we moved, we were in Malawi. The contract finished and we came back to Nigeria. 2015, he got another job back in Malawi. We had to move again because he said he wanted his family with him. He didn't want the children to grow without him. So every time he got a job, we had to move. And then when I got to Malawi, I think in 2016, there was an invitation for a PTA meeting in the school my children attended. So I went there. The first day I attended that meeting, I met a woman. And then she said they were looking for the new PTA executive. And then she just looked at me. The first time I met her was in my children's school. I just introduced myself as somebody that just arrived in Malawi. Then I was trying to make new friends. And then she just looked at me and said, this woman can be the PTA secretary. So I asked her, I said, why should I be the PTA secretary? I don't know how this school functions. I don't know anything about, I've never done this before. She said, no, you can't do it. So we had a meeting that day. That was how I became the PTA secretary without election or anything. So I was PTA secretary and then the PTA chairman owned the private university. One day we were having a conversation and then he asked me, what is your qualification? You don't look like a housewife. I told him I have a master's degree in leadership and change. And then he asked me, can you be a secretary in the university? I've seen you do a good job so far. I said, okay. And he asked me to see him in his office in 2 days' time. So that's how my journey started, reclaiming myself as a woman, as an individual. So I arrived at his office that day, and after a conversation with him and the VC, That's the vice chancellor. The vice chancellor told me, I don't think I want you in a position of a secretary. Can you teach? I said, I have never thought. It has never even ever. Let me put it, throughout this journey, I think I lost myself in the process.
Mm-hmm.
But meeting certain people at every point in time, they saw something I was not seeing again. So every point in time, when they say you can do this, I begin to question, how did they know I can do this when I didn't even believe in myself? So that was how the journey started.
Wow. Something really stood out to me in this story. You always met people who saw something you were no longer seeing in yourself.
Yeah.
This is so profound. One thing I feel about life is that people are built up. You become great through people's help, or you become nothing through people's help. So if you meet people who see something in you that you don't see, something great in you, and they want to help you bring out your greatness, then they will help you and you become great.
Yes.
Then if you meet people who see greatness in you, but they do not want you to be great, they can also help you destroy your greatness. And then you start thinking that you're nothing.
Yeah,
I particularly love your story because many people now talk about women's lib and all of that. And it's okay for us to be liberated and everything. But I feel that somewhere inside of us, we really want the best for those who are our family, those who we kind of feel committed to the relationships that we step into.
Yeah.
So I would like you to just speak a little bit about how, when you talk about you giving up your dreams to be there for your husband, and I'm so proud of him because he believed in family. Because some men would love to travel and then they'll be free to roam the wilds because they don't have their family with them. But he wanted his family with him all the time.
Yeah.
And he cared about his family. Some people are even with their families, but they don't care about their family. And I feel that is commendable. So can you speak to that part about what it's meant or what it means as a woman to put your dreams aside, to follow my husband from job to job, location to location, and then to take care of my family? You got a job and you realized at this point, the only way to do me right now is to give all to this family. Was it something someone told you? Was it something you sat down and thought about? Can you tell us about what that meant and how you came about that decision?
Nobody told me. It was just a conversation I had with myself first before my husband. Because being the kind of person he was, he wanted me to be busy doing something. When I got the job, he was the one that gave me the encouragement, told me what to do, how to present myself, even he went shopping for some few dresses for me. Oh. But then I sat down and discovered that I can't do this together. I can't run a successful family. I can't be there for my children. Let me not talk about a successful family. I cannot be there for my children and still have this job. Because most of the times when I was the company secretary for that organization, and I was also the secretary to the managing director, it was a contracting firm. They went to constructions and the rest. So most times we go for meetings with the Ministry of Works, and then the meetings stretch into evenings. And then I have to pick my children by 4:30 from school. So I didn't need anybody to tell me that this thing will not work for you. So I decided that I just had to resign from the job.
So I really like something you said. It was a conversation you had with yourself.
Yeah.
As people who want to move forward in life, we have to have those conversations with ourselves. For some of us, we really like to talk to people, to others, to help us decide what we're going to do. But for people who are successful, we talk about self-reflection. Self-reflection is when you think about your emotions, your motivation, your desires, and you evaluate even the events of your day to see the areas where you could do better or your learnings. So you do this all the time. So self-reflection is so important. And what you're saying, when you say I had a conversation with myself, you actually are saying it was self-reflection. It was you reflecting on your life you had.
Yeah.
And you said you were a young woman who got married. I must commend you. I feel that you are very wise. Because some of us, it takes maybe in our 50s before we learn to become self-reflective, to start to think. So for a woman to actually make decisions that will help her, whether it is to give up her job so she could focus on her children for this time, you have to actually think and talk to yourself. Think with yourself and talk with yourself. So that was that. But there's something you said again about you lost yourself in the process. What did you mean by that? And how does that happen?
What I meant by losing myself was the fact that I couldn't take any personal decision without putting every other person into consideration. If I have to travel, I have to think about the welfare of the children. I have to think about if my husband's job is going to take him out of town. So situations like that. There was a time I couldn't even attend weddings of my closest, even my elder sister's wedding, I didn't attend. Because I had to take that. He was out of town. And there was no way I was going to carry the children along with me. I couldn't take any decision without putting my family into consideration. I couldn't even do anything. I lost myself because at that point, I would say I was a little bit confused because I was wondering, is this all I have to do throughout my life? Is this all about life? Is this what life is all about? But then those self-reflections really helped me because at some point I always had a question session with God because so many people looked up to me. So many people thought that was what I wanted. I wanted to be a full-time housewife, but that wasn't what I wanted. And then when you have friends that look at you and think you're living your best life, you can't talk to them about anything happening around you. Because every time you try to mention the fact that you wish you did so many things, they will be wondering, so where you are, is it not enough? It looks as if you're greedy, wanting to achieve more. So I couldn't talk to I couldn't even talk to anybody.
So why?
But silently, I was always questioning myself, is this what I was created to do? Yes, I was happy to be a housewife. I was happy to have children. But then, is this what I was brought on earth to do? So that's where the losing of self was. Because at some point, I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Wow.
So you yearned
because my attention was, I wanted more, but I didn't even know what I wanted.
Wow.
So that's why I said I lost myself.
And thank you so much. This is so good. I don't know if somebody might be hearing us and be in that situation where you don't know what you want anymore because you've given so much of yourself to others. You've put yourself aside all the time. It wasn't about you, and as mothers, especially those who are mothers, or maybe not even a mother, you might be a caregiver to somebody in your family. So the person comes first.
Yeah.
So from Iyaiya's story, I think let's just keep listening. It seems there is a time in life where sometimes you make those sacrifices, but that is not all we're here to do. It's so exciting. It's so encouraging to know that we're going to turn a corner very soon and we'll see what happened. So, you didn't know what you even wanted to do. So when did this change? You mentioned the fact that people began to see what was in you. So not only did you not know what you wanted to do, you no longer knew your strengths.
Yeah.
Well, you no longer knew what you were good at. Did that affect your confidence?
Yes, it did. At some point, it did. There was a time even to go out to socialize was a problem for me. Okay, you're invited to an event and then you enter, and then the next thing is, what do you do for a living? So how do you begin to explain that? And sometimes most of these people are maybe your classmates in the university, and then you see the positions they are in society, and you wonder, is that where I could have been, if not for what I'm doing now? So at some point, I couldn't go out. I get invitations, I don't honor them. Wow. Because that question is, what do you do for a living? I think I read a book. I think then social media just came up. I think it's on Facebook or whatever. And then, most of those comic chats that people usually have.
Yeah.
And then somebody said she went for an interview and she was asked what she does. She's a housewife. So she told them she was a home manager. So that was where it dawned on me that that's the truth. She wasn't a housewife alone. She was managing the home. Because most of these things we do as housewives cannot be quantified. When you somebody will ask you, what do you do for a living? What if at that point in time you want to be a housewife? That's where you are. That's the space you need to hold for yourself for the time being until things improve, or until you begin to see the vision you had before as a young person, before your marriage. So it was at that point in time, I think it was in 2013, that was when I began to question myself. In Malawi, then I got introduced to a Kenyan lady. She was a housewife just like me. And then one day we went for a sporting event in my children's school. We saw another man that was a house husband. Oh, what? I don't know what to
committee of house managers.
But then, yes, his wife was working and he was the one in charge of the home. So I had a conversation with this Kenyan. She was like, do you know that this man does not work in Malawi? There's a term they call us, accompanied. Because all the expatriates had their spouses. So all of us were termed accompanied. Okay. She said, this man is an accompanied. I said, so if a man decided to leave everything he has done to be here for his family, his wife is the one providing the income. So why should I be bothered that I am here with my children? I think that gave me a little clarity, but that was not final. Mm-hmm. I didn't still know what to do with myself.
So good. So this was where it was like, Eureka! Freedom! Yeah.
Yeah.
So the journey to finding yourself, your journey to stepping into your purpose is not like I went to bed and I woke up with it. It was a journey. But one thing that I have to say from your story is that you showed up. You went to things that concerned your children and you showed up. And you also wanted to have relationships. You reached out to create relationships with other people. The only place where you were not showing up was all those places where people come to show their grades and what they're achieving and all those things. But but where it mattered most, because this was your own business. You were in the business of family building.
Yeah.
You're building the lives of your children. Where it mattered most, you showed up. And while you were showing up just for these children, then you were meeting those who God used to put you on the path of where you were going. And also, there's something very, very, very good. I just want us to point out in this story is the place where you not only got those who God used to help you on your journey, also those questions you used to ask yourself. Is this all I'm meant to do? Those things that gave you discontentment. those questions were answered. For example, meeting that man answered the question of, this thing I'm doing, is it really worth it? Is this all I'm meant to do? And you thought it was because you were a woman until you saw a man too, who gave it all up. Who gave it all up? If a man, because my husband is the man, is the one I've been following up and down. And not when they say housewife, look at now, we know housewife, but we had no name for the man. We couldn't know whether we should say house husband or what are we going to call him. But housewife, everybody in the world knows the term housewife. So it was not even common for men to do this. So when you saw this thing that wasn't common, it jolted you into thinking, my. I'm not in a bad place. So just continue that story for us, telling us, you said it was the beginning, but it wasn't the final. You still continued. So after that answered that question. So moving forward.
Yeah, after that day, I think I visited the Kenya. I visited the lady. So I wasn't invited to her house. I just sat in my house. I felt if she could make that statement, it means there's something about her that I could learn. So I drove to her house one day. What I should say is that in the expatriate community in Malawi, what happens is that to visit somebody, you need to inform, or I should say that it should be normal. But in Nigeria, it's not. You just stand up one day and decide to visit your friend without any information.
I like it.
And there's no how your friend will not accept you into their home. But going to another place where you see that before you visit somebody, you need to call ahead because the person might not be there. So I just felt I should visit her. So I drove to her house. And then the security man said, who was I looking for? I told him. So he opened the gate and I drove him. She offered me coffee and then we had a conversation. At that point, she was also lamenting because she had a job where she was coming from. And then she had to move because of her husband. She was also complaining, but then during those conversations, we started learning from each other. Once in a while, we'll go out to have coffee. Before, I was always home. And the only person I visited was another Nigerian lady who is in the US now. But with her, she will say, there's a book cafe. Let's go and have coffee. So there was this book cafe where there's a place for coffee and then you can buy books, secondhand books. So when we'll go there, we'll buy books for ourselves, buy books for the children, have coffee, and then we leave. That's how the relationship started. And then in middle of 2014, my husband's contract ended. We had to come back to Nigeria. And then when I came back to Nigeria, I went back to train for the beats because coming back, I discovered that there were so many new designs that I didn't know how to do. So I had to go back to register to train for beats designing again. He had told me that we were not going to move because he had seen that the woman he married was not the person I am now. Because it's like I was running in circles. Most times he will come back from work and ask me, are you okay? I say, yes, I'm okay. But I wasn't okay. But I just say I'm okay. So he said, okay, now that I'm going back for this new job, you're not going to come with me. You and the children will be in Nigeria. I said, no problem. I was happy. At least when I'm in Nigeria, I can start whatever I want to start, whatever is in my head to do. But then before the term will end, that's about a month plus, he called me and said, you have to move. You have to move. I can't be here alone. I need my children with me. I need you here. Okay. So I said, okay, no problem. At least let them finish this first term. Second term, we'll move. And that was what happened. We moved. And then the issue of attending the first PTA, and I was made a PTA secretary. And from that, being a PTA secretary, I think that was my turning point. Because as the secretary, I had to organize the sporting events. I have to source for snacks that the children need. And so in the process, I have to interact with a lot of people. Sometimes I leave the house about 10 a.m. By the time I'm coming back, it's 2 p.m. I have to move from one office to the other, looking for assistance so that any sporting event in school will be successful. I think that's what opened me to the fact that there was more. there was more to me that people were seeing that I did not see. And then this same lady that had looked at me and said, you can be the PTA secretary, introduced me to Inner Way. And then I think just 1 year after that, I was made the president. Wow. I had no idea how they operate. Somebody said, okay, can you pick me for the next meeting? One of the members. I said, okay, no problem. I picked her as well. He said, if you're asked to be the president, what can you do? I said, I don't know. I've never done this before. And she said, but you can manage. I looked at her, I was driving, I looked at her, I said, I can manage. I said, okay, no problem. She said, please don't reject it. This is somebody that we have never had a conversation more than one sentence. She said, please don't reject it. I said, no problem. Because when she asked me to pick her for the next meeting, I was wondering, when did we have this relationship that I have to pick you for the next meeting? Your house is not even far to the next meeting. Why should I pick you? But then I don't know. I said, okay, no problem. And then the conversation happened in the car. When I reached there, the president said, Iyaiya, I think I've served for 2 years, and as a new member, we want new ideas, we want fresh ideas. So you will be the next president. I looked at the other members. An elderly woman that I became friends with looked at me and said, you can do it. You can do it. Stop being afraid. We usually sit together every meeting, because the first day I attended their meeting, she told me to come and sit beside her. This one is about, should be about 60-something years. They come and sit beside me.
Wow.
And then we started having a conversation. Even when we attend meetings, the president or whoever is talking, both of us are having a conversation by the side. And then after that meeting, she asked me to visit her. When children have gone to school and you're not doing anything, what do you do? The first time I drove to her house, we just sat down, just had a general conversation. What do you do? This is a period in your life. Don't feel bad. Wow. I know you're thinking of so many things right now, but your children should be your priority. Don't feel bad that you're following your husband. You're here. You're here for a purpose. And all that. It was through that meeting I met her. And then that day she said, don't refuse it. You can do this. Don't worry, I'm here to help you.
Wow.
I said, okay, no problem. And then time for induction, she said they should do it in her house. It's usually done in a hotel where members pay for snacks and everything. But that day she said they should do it in her home. I said, no problem. So we went there. After the induction, she was like a guide to me.
Next week, we're going to listen to the concluding part of our conversation with Iya. But there's something I noticed about Iya in this first part of her story. She was always honoring people, respecting others, putting others before herself. I wonder if that was a good thing, especially in today's culture where we are advised to put ourselves first, focus on our own needs, do only what makes us happy, do only what pleases us. Is this the only or even a good way to live our lives? Did it pay off for Iya that she always put others above herself? We're going to find out next week in the concluding portion of our interview. Meanwhile, I also want to let you know that there's an important, an exciting, a very community-oriented announcement next week. I'll be sharing something really cool with you all in the next episode. So please listen, tune in, download, subscribe, share, and please, most of all, listen. And please, before we see again, I want to ask you, keep on showing up, because when you keep showing up, mercy won't stop you. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.